another segment of Senior Profile. I'm your host, Howard Rogers. This is our June show, ladies and gentlemen, and you know what we're going to talk about. Yes, right. It's hurricane preparedness time, hurricane season. 10 years since Katrina, and we've been having a lot of guests on this show over the years, and we're bringing back some good old friends. We have Dr. John Kiefer, who is from assistant professor at University of New Orleans, and we have a new friend of ours, Miss Kimberly Van Wagner, who is just earned her master's in public administration. And Kimberly had me to come in and sit in on her master's dissertation, and I was very impressed on Kimberly's master's dissertation concerning hurricanes here in the city of New Orleans, well, actually in this region. So, welcome to Senior Profile. And Kimberly, tell us about your work.
Well, I did my master's, it's a capstone in the MPA program on policies that affect older adults during disasters and policies that help older adults stay in their home longer. So that's called aging in place. And I looked at how these two groups of policies are working together and whether they're working together. So I learned a lot of very useful information, I think, for our viewers about older adults and disasters and things that people need to be doing to take care of themselves and to ensure that they get some recovery assistance after disasters. I looked at hurricanes and earthquakes and tornadoes and also just home health disasters like falls and fires and things like that.
So in terms of hurricanes, what does your research tell you? What should people look for?
Well,
after a hurricane or prepared before her?
Sure. So we can start with preparedness. Older adults, after a hurricane, older adults are the most likely to be negatively affected. And that's because they have health problems and they might experience traumas that cause health problems during hurricanes, but also because a lot of older adults are already on fixed incomes and don't necessarily have access to technology. They might have hearing impairments or have other types of physical impairments that make them more vulnerable. And so they're less likely to hear or to understand or to really take action when it comes to preparedness or evacuation. So a lot of what I looked at was what are some ways that people are studying older adults when it comes to preparedness and looking at deaf populations and looking at people who are hard of hearing. I looked at sheltering as well. A lot of shelters, at least before Hurricane Katrina, were not equipped to take care of people with disabilities or who are older. And so cots were uncomfortable, food was high in sodium, there weren't medical professionals on hand. Now some of that has changed and there are accommodations for anybody with special needs in general shelters, and older adults can sign up for registries beforehand. Through the City of New Orleans, we have a registry, and you could sign up to get special assistance during an evacuation and, if necessary, go to a medical facility if you had a problem like a dialysis type of problem or something where you need constant medical assistance during an evacuation.
Okay. Well, Dr. John, CHART, University of New Orleans. So tell us about your work, because I don't think a lot of people know about CHART and what CHART does.
Well, we've always had a very robust program that aims to help vulnerable populations during disaster. CHART is UNO's Center for Hazard Assessment, Response, and Technology, and it was established back in 2001 as a social science research center that really focuses on this region and how to assist the community in better preparing for the many, many disasters that we face. CHART has got a long history of working with the Governor's Office of Homeland Security, with with FEMA, with private contractors, and with other public entities to really research and how can we make this area more resilient. For example, right now one of our major projects is with regard to risk literacy and disasters, and we've gone out and tried to provide appropriate publications that are written at a literacy appropriate level that informs people on how to make themselves, their communities, their homes, their families more resilient when we face disasters. Another project we've worked at for almost a little over 10 years now is with regard to repetitive flood loss. We have so many properties here in Louisiana that seem to flood every time there's a major disaster. And so we've got initiatives on how can we go out into the community and help make these homeowners, again, these communities more resilient. That may be raising the home as in raising it up, raising the home as in tearing it down and building a new home, or what minor things can people do to keep flooding out of their homes, such as putting a lip on a garage if they've converted a garage to a bedroom. So we spend a lot of time doing those kinds of projects as well. We're very excited about a new project that we're going to embark upon actually this month. It's got to do with partnering with the city's Regional Transit Authority, with the city's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, and with the University of New Orleans. And we're going to take a look at the vulnerable populations and make sure that during a disaster we have the means to transport these people when they need transportation. In other words, do we have the appropriate assets at RTA to move people that have to be, say, in a wheelchair, or particularly these more robust wheelchairs that they have now that are a little bit bigger and go on more terrain. So we certainly encourage everybody to that might need some sort of special evacuation to call the city's 311 number to get into that database so that if you have an emergency, the city can go ahead and move them.
Yeah, in fact, along that lines, I'm sitting here remembering the last time that you were here, you had developed a book for people with slight impairment. If I'm not. Am I correct on that?
Well, my colleagues at UNO really had the lead on that, and they've developed a publication. They've developed a leader's guide, as well as guides for the citizens on how to basically become better prepared. But one of the things we really thought important, particularly after Katrina, was to reach out to our vulnerable population and to really get them involved in making their own plans. Because as you know, having a personal preparedness plan is so important. And when we looked at the number of people that were killed after Katrina, one theme that we saw moving through that was they were mostly older folks. And most older folks really don't like change. And unless we reach out to them and inform them as to what's going to happen when you enter this evacuation process, where are you going to, how are you going to get fed, how are you going to get your medications, what's going to happen to your pet, how are you going to be reunited with your loved ones, people are very reluctant to become engaged in the evacuation process. So after Katrina, CHART and other UNO professionals formed a senior citizen evacuation advocacy group. And we brought various teams together, and I know you were involved in that, and we said, what are the real needs of our older citizens in this community? How can we best reach out to them? How can we inform them? How can we tell them how to work with the emergency managers here in the city to get out of the city when disaster threatens? And we think we've been successful with that, because certainly the Gustav evaluation was, by any measurements, a largely successful effort.
Yes, it was. It was. The interesting thing about that, we always kept talking about lessons learned from Katrina. I want to know, have we learned any lessons from Katrina outside of, hey, it's coming, let's get out of Dodge City?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we learned was that it's very important for individual citizens to take a bigger chunk out of their emergency preparedness initiative. I guess a champion of that after Katrina has been General Honore.
Yeah.
He constantly stresses the importance of having families prepare for disaster. I mean, it can be as simple as one of the things I learned from the general is going out and collecting some of your soda bottles or your spent soda bottles where you finished them up, clean them out, fill them with water, and you've got a bunch of quart water bottles during an emergency. But make a plan to reunite with your family. What's going to happen if your area floods? And so I think that the city, that the citizens are certainly a lot better prepared. We can always be even better, but I think we've moved in the right direction.
I hope so, because I'm sitting here remembering conversations, people calling the Council on Aging, wanting to know how could they get their loved ones out of harm's way, some from away. I remember distinctively a gentleman calling from Boston was concerned about his mother trying to get out of New Orleans. And then those obnoxious phone calls that we received from people who lived right here in the city, but they didn't want to evacuate with their grandparents or parents because they just didn't want them to be a burden to them. And, for those individuals, I hope they've found themselves after this 10-year period, and maybe going forward we won't get those kind of messages again, but you never know. It's just kind of disheartening when somebody doesn't want to take personal responsibility for one of their loved ones.
But now we do have a better registry program, and that's what the chart is going to be studying with the city, is how that registry is working, and then how would it work for an evacuation. And so if people didn't want to take somebody in their family, then they could sign up to be evacuated through the city. And I think after Gustav, more people have confidence, I hope, in the city's ability to safely evacuate. And I know that the people, running those evacuations are really constantly looking for better ways to improve it. Now that people can evacuate with pets, the federal legislation has changed so that pharmacies can provide emergency medications for people, and FEMA has changed its shelter situation so that there are medical professionals on hand. The city registry also, when you sign up, if you're a senior, there's several evacuation spots just for seniors that have additional medical staff on hand. So that should be, hopefully, that should help
actually,
to reassure
Kimberly,
people.
Guess where that came from?
Did that come from you?
That came from our consultation with the folks from CHART.
Yeah.
When the city was getting ready to rewrite the evacuation plan for the entire city after Hurricane Katrina, because we didn't have a plan. And we were consulted by FEMA, and talking with Dr. John and others from his particular staff, we came up with the idea of having designated spots for seniors so that they can evacuate. So that's why you have senior centers throughout the city of New Orleans where somebody can go in case of evacuation. This place is designated for you. You can go and get picked up there. Because before, it was kind of still helter-skelter. They had everybody going to the convention center and then leaving the convention center and going to Union Passenger Terminal, and which didn't make too much sense.
Like an extra step, maybe.
Yeah, why did you throw that extra step? Where you could go to a neighborhood center, senior center, or a designated pickup point, from there.
That a lot of people are already comfortable with, too.
Oh, they are.
They're already senior centers, so they can go to where they might feel more comfortable.
Yeah, well, that was the idea.
That's a great idea.
One of the things that John just said, to make seniors a little bit more comfortable with the evacuation process. So we thought that they would be comfortable going to a place that they were familiar with, that they knew, and some of that anxiety was kind of, melted away a little bit. Not that much, but at least you could get that individual there, triage them, and then get them down to UPT.
So it sounds like that, plus the idea that, if a hurricane is coming, we now do not shelter in place at all. Those are two big lessons learned, I think. We are not encouraging that, I think, as a city, because we know that there's always a potential for danger. One study I looked at, too, examined older adults and food safety, just in the case of, say, even a power outage. So maybe we don't get a full-on hurricane, but we have a power outage, which happens a lot, and it's in a flood, and you're sort of stuck in your home, and then what to do, is your food safe? And that was a big concern that people, they don't actually, regular people, none of us really seem to know. We often do a sniff test, which actually isn't a good idea. And so It's for now, when people are making their preparedness kits, they should be thinking about, canned food and non-perishables, things that will last for a while, and maybe just leave those refrigerators and freezers closed and not even tempt fate on that.
So don't worry about that 40 pounds of shrimp that you just bought.
I mean, or
from
cook
the guy
it right away.
Yeah, cook it right away. All right, so we all going over to Kim's house.
Invite everybody
for a shrimp
over.
boil. All right.
The
I'll bring
lights
the
are
French
out.
bread.
Come to my house for a shrimp party. Yeah.
So in your research, what did you find out?
Well, so more and more older adults are going to choose to stay in their homes, and more and more councils on aging are going to be having to figure out how to support that. If you add on top of that disasters, then what we're looking at is people who, 10 or 20 years ago might have been in a nursing home with sort of more professional care are going to be expected to take on their own care situations. If you receive home health care, your home health care worker may not be able to make it to you during an evacuation.
Mm-hmm.
They might not even have talked in their own office place about what to do with their clients. And so people are starting to wake up to this fact that more and more people are going to be growing older in the home, and they are probably going to have one or more chronic illnesses or heart problems, diabetes, kidney failure, or eyesight trouble. It could be anything. Any of us is susceptible to that. But what it means is if we're in a situation where the power's out and you're on an electrical machine, that's a problem. If we're in a situation where your home has a flash flood or you experience that and nobody can get to you, that's a problem. That's why it's really important to sign up for the registry so that you're on the radar. And so my research showed that people who are living independently and are getting older and maybe don't think that they need assistance or services should probably sign up anyway, because a disaster can lead to an injury or illness that prevents you from taking care of yourself.
Okay, well, this is a lot of information, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take a slight break, and then we're going to be back, and we're going to talk about lessons learned and how we can prepare for this upcoming hurricane season. Thank you for tuning in to Senior Profile, and we'll be right back.
Oh, those boys are much too much. Those boys are much too much. We got the spirit. We're hot. We can't be stopped. We got the spirit. We're hot. We can't be stopped. We're going to beat them and bust them.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life.
Let's get a little bit rowdy. R-O-W-D-Y.
Take time to be a dad today. Call or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
Thank you for calling your GED Pep Talk Center. All right, now, are you ready for your GED Pep Talk?
Being nervous is okay. It just shows that you're serious about getting your diploma.
A lot of things are scary. Heck, I'm scared of clowns.
No quiero oír. Danny, no lo puedo hacer.
DMC, life in your pep talk style.
Just keeping it real, Debs, just keeping it real.
Whatever motivation you need, we've got a pep talk for you. Get your GED pep talk and find free classes at yourged.org.
All in together now, we can make it better now. Come on, can we do it?
Yeah, you know that we can.
We rope it up,
cause we know how to jump.
We roll it out,
cause we know how to skate.
We'll cut it down,
cause we know what to eat.
We'll swap it out,
we eat healthy stuff.
Can we do it?
Yeah, you know that we can.
Can we do it?
Just moving a little and eating better every day can help make you and your child healthier. Search We Can to find doable tips and activities that you can use every day.
Hi, welcome back to Senior Profile, and we're talking with some good friends of ours from the University of New Orleans about hurricane preparedness, and also Kimberly, who had just finished a paper concerning hurricane preparedness, and we're also talking to Dr. John Kiefer about CHART, which is a program out at the University of New Orleans that is dedicated towards different types of disasters. So, Dr. John, what have we learned in 10 years?
We've learned a lot. And one of the, the most important things is how to communicate risk better to people. Again, with the literacy side, we've really realized that, boy, we have to reach out and we've got to give folks a message in a way that they can understand, and then they can take appropriate action. Another thing we realized is that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to sending out information about risk. For instance, here in South Louisiana, we're overrepresented with folks that have hearing problems, and I think that this is mirrored in our Cajun and culture, because so many of the folks have come down from Nova Scotia, and indeed a lot of the data show that they have the same high numbers of folks that have hearing problems. So how do we reach out to these folks and get the messages out? And we've learned how to do this a little bit better. For instance, one of the things one of our UNO researchers discovered is that most people make an evacuation decision based on their experience with the last category of hurricane. So we had folks sitting back and saying, well, I went through Betsy.
Yeah, I went through Betsy.
Cat 3.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick around and take my chances. We realized, though, that Cat 3, the only thing that the Cat 3 means is the wind speed. But a Cat 3 is not a Cat 3 is not a Cat 3. In other words, it could be a very big storm, it could be a slow-moving storm, it could be a storm with a lot of rain, a storm that comes from one direction might have a very different impact than the same size storm that comes from another direction. And this is a message that's really gotten home to the National Hurricane Center. And they've now carefully crafted messages not to mention so much, not to myopically focus on wind speed, but rather look at the direction that it comes from, look at your particular community. You know, in some hurricanes that we had after Katrina, we found that many of our smaller communities were impacted to a much greater extent than they were impacted during Hurricane Katrina. We said, gee, why did this happen? Because the hurricane came from a different direction and had a different hydrology with regard to storm surge. And we also focused more on storm surge because that's the biggest killer. It's not so much the winds. And so we've learned how to shape these messages better. Don't tell people what's going to happen to them. Tell them what to do. What actions should they take when they face a hurricane? And so those things have certainly been reshaped in the 10 years since Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, okay. All right. Kim, what you have to add to this?
I think that a lot of community groups have gotten more involved, and you know, church groups too, in making sure that older adults are prepared. There's sheets that they need to be writing their medicines down on so that they can bring those with them. There's just how to pack your belongings and what to take. Getting signed up for the registries, and I think those are all important lessons. And also, I don't know that there are many people who want to ride out a hurricane anymore. We hope that that's not true. 10 years can be a long time for some people. They might forget about how awful everything was.
Yeah, I know. For some reason, people, after a period of time, and that's why we're kind of concerned, have they lulled themselves into a sense of complacency? Are they now, well, I went through Katrina, I evacuated, I came back, I put my life back together again, I put my house back together, and if another one is coming, oh, well, I think I'm safe now. In fact, one of the things, if you notice, that was on the news last week when they showed this house in Texas that went floating down the river. It was up on stilts. Yeah. And so I start thinking about all these houses that people have built, higher than the floodplain. Now, after the storm, FEMA made us, in some instances, people raised their houses and got elevation grants. But then there are a couple of houses out by UNO, and I mean, it looks like a fishing camp. They just went up, 20 feet in the air. So how, during a storm, they think they feel very safe up there, but, we don't know.
We don't know. And the other thing to remember is even if you feel safe in your home, if city services are knocked out, how long are you going to last? Especially if you're older, you need to be careful. I think the other thing that's a lesson learned after Katrina is when you return, and being aware that older adults are more likely to be victims of contractor fraud, being sure to have a relationship with your bank to talk about what needs to get paid and how can you get an SBA loan, and seeking out mental health services. That's That's one that's like a silent sort of a consequence of storms and disasters for older adults who tend to be very proud about not looking for mental health services or even other services. Now, hopefully, those types of services will be just part of the package of when you come back, this is what you're going to be exposed to, and you can sign up for it.
I'm glad you brought that up. I not too long ago went out to Oxford and was speaking to a group of psychiatrists, and they were asking about mental health issues of the elderly. And Dr. John was just talking about some of the lessons we learned. One of the things that I distinctly remember after the storm, when we started to get the senior centers back up and running and just sit down talking with seniors, or just talking with people in general, it was more or less, well, I lost this, and then they would start to talk about, well, I had all these furs and I had all these beautiful dresses, or I had 3 cars, or I had this and I had that, and I was sitting there going like, yeah, well, I lost a lot of stuff too, but it was stuff. All right, I mean, fortunately we didn't lose any close friends during the storm, from the storm itself. Now, the after effect after the storm, I guess from the stress and from the mental health issue part of it, that some people succumb to sickness.
Well, you can
and die.
Yes, easily become depressed or anxious. There's a lot of evidence of post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's evidence that older adults have more attachment to their belongings, which we know in general, right? From when people have to move, or even relocation for other purposes that don't have to do with disasters can trigger stress in older adults. So, we have to be making sure to reach out to them in ways that help them maintain dignity and encourage them to seek out mental health assistance, because otherwise they might succumb to something that really is preventable.
Yeah, so. It is. So, Dr. John, y'all going to be working with the City of New Orleans Office of Homeland Security?
The city's office and the RTA, and it's a joint partnership between all 3 of us, and we're going to, again, take a look at the databases that the city maintains of people with special needs, and then make sure that we have the right transportation assets in place to move those people when an emergency comes. And because the RTA has a long record of being able to provide special lift capability, and they track that. They have a good knowledge of how many people with what types of special needs they move daily. Now, we hope to use that data and then maybe apply it, extrapolate back to the population of the city, and kind of see how many people might you really have to move in an emergency. On the other side, make sure these folks are in the database, make sure the database is accurate, make sure that that database has the right kinds of information that the RTA needs to have these lift assets on hand, and hopefully move them. If we have a shortfall, that will give us a wonderful argument to be able to go back to state or federal government and say the city needs more assets to move people.
Yeah, okay, good, because you mentioned those wheelchairs on steroids these days. For some reason, they just keep getting bigger and bigger. Yeah, in fact, you see some folks flying down the interstate in wheelchairs these days. Like, wait a minute, you're going faster than me, but...
So they may not need evacuation.
Yeah, that's right. They might not need evacuation. Just give them a light and let them go about their business. But that's good to know. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're at the end of the program, and as you've heard, please, if you do not have a plan, dial 311, call in, register with the City of New Orleans. Hurricane season will go quick, but we need to be prepared. Thank you for tuning in to Senior Profile, and we'll see you next time.